some final spring training thoughts. Travis Swaggerty is optioned. We'll talk about that and why the roster decisions being made by the Pittsburgh Pirates are a good thing. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Pirates.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to that Pirates podcast, everybody. My name is Ethan Smith, and to my right, as always, every Monday and will be throughout the entire year is Gary Morgan. Gary, how are you after a wonderful weekend? And it also included the Jaggy Awards.
Well, the Jaggies were great. Second year running now that Jim's run that, and Good stuff. Check it out. Jim Stam did the Jaggies last night and named the 10 worst Pittsburgh sports accounts there are, and I think most of them are pretty undisputed.
Oh, yeah, and I was not on there. Gary was not on there, so you came to the right place if you're listening here. And on a much, much more positive and relevant note, opening day is 4 days away. Pirates baseball is right here, ready to go. Obviously, you guys, I've told you all the content that you're going to have coming your way. You'll see it on the bottom of the screen as well. I have a lot going on this week. We have Gary today. We have Locked On Reds at some point, Locked on NL Central. We got Craig on Thursday. And you guys are going to find out something that me and Steven Offenbaker over at Locked On Reds are doing as an opening day bet that the Pirates lose, you're not going to like too much. But spring training at this point, let's just say it's done. I mean, there's like one more game left, I think. But at that point, what does it really matter? What this team is going to do and what they've done roster-wise has pretty much already been set in stone with Travis Swaggerty, who we're going to talk about later, Chris Owings, the whole 9 yards. We've seen all that stuff on our timelines already. But I wanted to ask you some thoughts about spring training, is like your final thoughts on spring training as it's kind of closing that door of, as we mentioned, like I believe 2 weeks ago, the first full spring training in almost 3 years, maybe longer than that.
First full spring training, first real spring of competition where there was actual battles. Yeah. Where you weren't worried about Phil Evans maybe making it and somehow turning into something. This was, real prospects fighting for real spots, and you can argue about whether they had a legitimate shot or not. Mm-hmm. But still, you got to see the depth on display. You get to see a lot of what's going to be in AAA. I thought spring training was really interesting this year.
Yes, it was. And AAA, by the way, I implore everyone, I believe if you get MLB TV, I think they're including MILB TV in your package this year, or there is a package that you can get for it. If you can watch the Indianapolis Indians play, watch them. Like if the Pirates are on an off day and Indy's playing, watch that team, because there are going to be a lot of players on that team that could eventually come up here. One that I found very interesting was they already announced, by the way, that Endy Rodriguez and Henry Davis were going to be AAA, AA, as I already expected. They announced that a lot of other guys were going to be there too, but you mentioned the depth as well. And I think when we talk about that, a lot of people are thinking, oh, depth, great thing. It is a great thing. But let's also remind everyone that the deepness in the system is still unknowns. There are known commodities there, but there are still some unknowns that they're going to have to eventually figure out and weed out. But as we always say, that's going to play itself out the way it's supposed to. Now, going into the season, obviously there are some players that are not here that some people wish were here. Endy Rodriguez obviously is the biggest one from what I've seen, as a lot of people wanted them here day one. I get it. It's the same story every year with the Pittsburgh Pirates. They're going to do it next year with Henry Davis. They're going to do it the year after with whoever's ready to come up after that, and after that, and after that. They'll do it with Termarr Johnson in like 3 years. It's going to happen. But the big question I have, I guess, now that we've had the first full spring training of competition and all this good stuff, Do you think that that's going to have a positive effect on how this team starts the year, especially this week, going just straight into opening day?
I mean, I think it should have people understanding that there's someone running up their back.
Yeah.
That's always a good thing. Pressure in baseball. When you feel like there's nobody coming up behind you, I mean, you may not think the same way as you do when
No.
like you know for a fact, like, hey, I beat this guy out, but it was spring, and how long are they going to give me up here to struggle before they make a decision in the opposite direction? Let's say Kanan Smith and Jigba actually gets a roster spot, which I don't think is defined quite yet.
Mm-hmm.
He gets a roster spot. Well, it would be directly over Travis Swaggerty. So, if he comes up and he stinks in April, well, let's not forget that Travis Swaggerty almost beat you.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of that that's going to play out. Now, some of the veterans, like, are they scared? Is Carlos Santana going, geez, I better hurry up? That Nunez guy looked really good. I
No.
probably not. Is Austin Hedges afraid? No. But they know that there's depth coming, and they know there's depth available. The pitching staff, Vince Velasquez, somebody that he has to know. I gotta throw the ball as if
Yeah.
my career lives on it. Because if not, I'm going to the bullpen, and I know that one of that giant group of starters is coming up here to take my job. JT Brubaker. Maybe stop having that one blow up inning every game. Like, there's gonna be some guys that things that we've, like, turned a blind eye to before because we didn't have options. Well, you have options now.
Yeah. And I agree. And one thing that I hope that this helps with is I hope that we don't get the the lineups constructed weeks in advance. I think that'll stop at this point now because there's going to be a lot of moving parts and a lot of changing. Because with what me and Gary are saying, this is just if the team was to stay 100% healthy and just be performance based. Once injuries enter the fold, because injuries are a part of baseball, we're not going to act like they're not. That's going to make it even more interesting because then what happens if a guy, like you said, Vince Velasquez goes down with, like, who knows, like a broken pinky or something, or like a messed up finger, and then Johan Oviedo comes up here and lights it up? Why would they go back? It's one of the, I mean, we've seen that in baseball plenty of times where a guy goes down with an injury, a guy comes up, plays well, that guy never gets his job back. It just happens.
Yeah, people get Wally pipped all the time, and I think that for the most part, the Pirates are, I think, frustratingly cautious with that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I'm hoping this year there'll be a little bit of a difference built in there because they do have so many guys with options. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so for instance, if Rodolfo Castro isn't getting it just at some point that's what's going to happen. They love him from the right side as a hitter. They don't like him so much as from the left side as a hitter. If at some point it looks like that's just not happening, and they may just let Bay take it over. And if Bay takes it over, then is Castro as valuable? I don't know. You know, they may want him to go down and get some at bats.
Yeah.
So, but you have the options, so you're able to do things like that. If Jack Sawinski is going to continue to strike out the way he is, don't think it'll be that long before they make the call to Swaggerty or somebody like that.
Yeah, and it's going to be fun, especially here on this podcast too, doing this every day. I mean, it's going to be fun just seeing how this all plays out. And if you want to play out the way that things work in a baseball franchise, make sure you go to Pro Baseball GM. You get a 100% free boost when you use the promo code Locked On in the game store. So download the app or go to probaseballgm.com. You're responsible for hiring the right coaches and staff, managing team finances, scouting and drafting players, managing through tough and difficult personalities and injuries, and navigating your franchise through free agency and all the ups and downs of a season. By the way, I have a lot of fun with it. Farthest I've got is 15 seasons out of 25 seasons, and that was without signing a free agent ever. So I was very happy with that. But it's a very difficult experience, but it's a very fun experience, and you can play it offline. Go walk to Point Park or something and literally just turn your phone on and play it. It's very fun, and you don't need an internet connection to do it. So Locked On Pirates listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store. So make sure you check it out. To download the game, just visit probaseballgm.com, scan the code on here or on the website, or look it up on the app stores. That's probaseballgm.com. Ultimate Baseball GM. Start your dynasty today. Yeah, I mean, you could even name your guy Ben Cherington if you wanted to. Go for it. I honestly also, before we get into the Travis Swaggerty stuff, I'm sure a lot of people did see his comments that he made recently, and I did kind of like what he was saying. Obviously, general managers are always very vague, and you have to kind of read between the lines on what they're saying here. But I think you could actually tell, like, mannerism wise, like when I was watching it, I was like, he actually does kind of look kind of ticked off after two 100 loss seasons. Like he was like kind of showing that kind of annoyedness, I guess, if that's the right word. Like he did actually look like he's wanting to see this team take a step forward. And I really do think they will. I mean, as I mentioned before we started, I did my prediction show on Friday with this beautiful new mic that everybody seems to love. And I said that we were going to go 74 and 88, but I also said that there's a real world where if some pieces fall in place, they could flirt with 500. And one of those pieces, as we've already talked about earlier, was Travis Swaggerty. I mean, the kid played lights out in spring for the most part, and he's not even on the roster. That should mean a lot to people.
It should. I mean, I think most people kind of just focus on the decision in the moment. You know, they tend to get mad that a guy's not starting here right away, and instead of focusing on the fact that he's still in the system, he's still right there, very likely going to play here this year.
Yeah.
Most rookies don't play an entire season when they start. There's always some kind of a delay to it, whether you're manipulating or not. Um, unless you're the Cardinals, of course. Jordan
Yeah, with
Walker's
Jordan
coming right
Walker.
up.
I was just
But
going to say that. I was like, yeah, the Cardinals aren't making this any easier on this take for Pirates fans to be okay with this when the Cardinals are bringing Jordan Walker up from Double-A.
well, I think first, if you're using Jordan Walker to make a Travis Swaggerty argument, you're making a huge error to begin
Way
with.
off.
But you know, in all sincerity, to me it was very close to a 50-50 decision on Swaggerty, I would imagine. And I do think that they really want to show some record improvement this year. And if that's the case, hey, I mean, I'm a fan of this team. I'm gonna have to default to Ben Cherington on some of those decisions that even I can't make 100%. Like, yeah, I want to do this, I want to do that. I like Kanan Smith and Jigba a lot. I
Yeah.
think he's somebody I want to see. I want to see Travis Swaggerty too. I can't say that I felt that way at the beginning of spring training.
No.
You know, so it wasn't completely invaluable what he did. He took himself from the afterthought list to first call up territory for me. That's what I want. And I want them to make hard decisions. But I also know, like, you don't bring in all those free agents and then make poor decisions on purpose just so that you can not win. I mean, they want a better record this year. Very clear. They may not get it, but they want it.
Well, and that's where I've also said I really feel like this is almost like a make or break part of this rebuild at this point this year. Mainly because record wise, I don't know. Not only as fans, we don't really, no offense, but we really don't matter in that grand scheme. Like, cool, we lost 100 games back to back years. The fans
Travis
are probably
Williams
ticked
agrees
off.
with you entirely.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, of course he does. I mean,
fans don't matter, and neither do wins and losses to him.
Apparently not. But in this sense, if they were to lose 95 games this year, I think that would be a problem. Like that would be like, okay, I even think if they lose 90 games, that's a problem. But 72 and 90, that's also a 10-game improvement from what we saw last year. 10 games is a lot. I could talk myself into that. But like anything below that, Like, it's kind of getting into that territory where you look at guys a different way. It's like, okay, where are we going with this at this point? Is this
It
going to amount to anything, or are we just
it
sitting
wouldn't
here
change my
twiddling our
mind.
thumbs?
It wouldn't change my mind as to like how far they could go in 2024.
Yeah.
But it changes my mind as far as basically what they see as quality talent, because I know they thought they did a good job patching holes this year. And they may have. We haven't really gotten to see it yet.
No.
But if they're wrong, then, that sucks because they're going to have to eventually patch holes at some point with free agent talent. And if they're not good at it, well, that's not a great thing.
No.
I do think this year, for me, in lieu of record only, because I'm with you. I think I could talk myself into 10 games being enough of an improvement that I'm semi happy at least, right?
Yeah.
But in lieu of that, I need to see some of the young talent make its way up here and start to get a foothold during 2023. And I don't mean like in September. I don't mean after the trade deadline. I mean like as the year progresses, I want to start seeing those guys make their way up here, get a foothold, get themselves entrenched so that I'm not having the same conversations about them come 2024 spring.
Yeah. And also, I think the biggest thing, too, that goes back to the record is I think a lot of people, including myself, would also want the Pirates to win 70 plus games, and it be because of O'Neal Cruz, Key Brian Hayes, Brian Reynolds, Rodolfo Castro, Andy Rodriguez, Mitch Keller, like guys that are actually going to be here for a pretty long time. If the Pirates win 75, 78 games, and it's because Rich Hill has like a 2.5 ERA, it's like, okay, great, this is awesome, but how do you replace him next year? Like, who's replacing him next year? And also, by then, who knows what's going on with all that? We're not going to go that far and thinking about trade deadline stuff. But going back to my point, I think it would be okay. Like, let's say they do get to that 10 win improvement and everything is like how it is, 70 and 92. But they made those improvements based off of how these young guys did rather than Carlos Santana hitting like 25 home runs or something. And that's why they did it. I think that would feel a lot better to Pirates fans to know, okay, these young guys were arguably the biggest reason as to why we won this many games. Not because Vince Velasquez and Rich Hill and a bunch of these plugins all did great things, but not enough to push them over the edge.
In an ideal world, yes, but I take the wins no matter how they come,
I mean, yes, so
obviously.
will I.
But I think ideally, yeah, you want Mitch Keller to drive the rotation. You want Roansy Contreras to step up and without a leash on him this year and show what he can be. You really would ideally like one or two of the starters that are in reserve to find their way up here. I think that's probably the best recipe for 2023 or 2024 looking a hell of a lot better than 2023 even. Is getting their feet wet so that you're not coming to spring worried about that rotation makeup.
Yeah. And I agree. And that's something that I think they're getting to finally. And that's one thing too that I remember a tweet of mine that actually kind of like got a little bit of traction last week where I said, when you look at the improvements that this roster has made, let's just backtrack. It is March 27th when this episode goes live. Let's backtrack to October when the season ended. There was a real argument, people, for Miguel Andujar to be stamped on the 26-man roster 4 months ago. He is now not even probably going to even have a 10-foot pole reach to make the team this year, pending injury and all that stuff. So, I mean, that's where I say the improvements that this team has made via free agency, via development. I won't lie. The development has been pretty damn good from what I've seen so far in terms of certain aspects. Like Luis Ortiz last year. I won't even lie to you. I didn't even know who Luis Ortiz was. at the beginning of last year. Now he's one of the best pitchers in the system. So this team is improved by leaps and bounds, and I think that it needs to be recognized by the on-field product. I
Yeah,
really
I
do.
think it has. I think they've moved forward. They've moved the ball forward. They've definitely taken a step forward as far as development goes. Ben Charrington even just said in the telecast the other day, it's really about the depth they're building in AAA and seeing those guys like rise up and start pushing. That's what he wanted to see. That's what he is seeing. Um, I think an argument could be made that they maybe brought in a couple too many um, stops,
Yeah.
a couple too many blocks, but I think it'll make sense as the season plays out, especially when you're looking at first base. I see a lot of people have been talking about wanting to cut Choi, and I understand why that came up because of the rule change and Jason Mackey suggesting that it could be done, and Ethan Houlihan, like everybody like coming out with a new rule, and here it is. Poor idea. I mean, Carlos Santana's 37 years old. You can't expect him to play 150 games at
No.
first base. You don't really want Connor Joe having to go over there. You could, but you don't really want it, right? So Choi is to me is a perfect guy to have with Santana, and it's okay if one of them sits on the bench. It really
Yeah.
is. Look at Choi's career. Look at what he did in Tampa. He sat on the bench quite a bit. I mean,
Yeah.
it's going to be fine. It really will.
Well, and I feel like the other layer to that too is also you look at the track record that Choi and the Pirates have had since he came here. I mean, you have the arbitration stuff, you then have the WBC thing, and there's been a lot of stuff that's happened to G-Man Choi since he's been in Pittsburgh, but obviously it's all been hashed out at this point. He's going to be on the opening day roster. I want him over there at first base defensively. I think he's phenomenal defensively over there for what we need. And it's been a while since we've had a good defensive first baseman, and that's something that I think the Pirates need to hold on to. And honestly, sometimes, guys, especially after the Jaggies last night, especially after, sometimes the Pirates making you a little tired, you need a Built Bar. And guess what? Built Bar's March Madness bracket is here. We know you have a favorite bar and puff, and now's your time to make it count. Go to builtbarmadness.com to vote for your favorites. I don't know which one I'm voting for. I haven't really had a Built Bar in like a week. I had a bunch of them on St. Patrick's Day, the cookies and cream kind. So I'll vote for cookies and cream. And if you want the Pirates to win, then you'll be voting for that bar too. Support your team, support your bar or puff. And when you vote for your favorite bar or puff, you'll be entered into a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built Bars. Not only that, but one Locked On fan, Gary, this would be good for you, will win a 12-month subscription to Built.com to have Built's best bars or puffs delivered monthly straight to your door, Gary. You don't have to get up. You just order it right off the computer. So you got to try Built. Built, the best protein bar ever. Seriously, they're so amazing you won't even think they're good for you. And, of course, don't forget to go to Built.com right now to go take care of that. Go to BuiltMadnessBracket.com. Go get some free stuff. They're phenomenal. Just do it. They're great.
I would
So,
have to say the cookies and cream are my favorite too. So
oh yeah, they're freaking great, dude. The only complaint that I've ever had somebody tell me is that they were too chewy. And I said, show me a protein bar that isn't chewy.
see, I like them that way. You got to you want it to take a while to eat them. Like that's what
Yeah.
makes them satisfying.
Yes, very. And what else is satisfying again is that we have baseball this week. And I came up with a fun idea for Gary this year because I know that we were doing our predictions for the week last year in between Mondays, and we're going to actually keep score this year. Obviously, I'm not going back through the entire season last year to try to figure out who won, but I would have guessed that Gary was probably more right than not half the time because I was like super optimistic about how weeks would go against like St. Louis and Milwaukee, and they would go like 2-5. I was like, oh, they'll go 4-3 this week. But obviously this week it would just be to kick things off. I believe it would just be the Reds series because it's Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, I believe, because they have that day off after because of Cincinnati weather, obviously. I'm kidding. It's not Cincinnati weather. They just always have that day off after. Um, so that would be 3 games, Gary. And I know it's still a couple of days away, but we know the opening day pitching matchup, Hunter Green and Mitch Keller. What are we thinking as far as how this opening series could go for Pittsburgh or against Cincinnati?
I think they'll take 2 or 3 here. I think we'll go 2 and 3. I think Mitch Keller going right away and Rowanzi probably. I don't know. They haven't really laid out exactly where they're going to head with the rotation quite yet, but I would assume Rowanzi would be the second, maybe Brubaker. Um, I don't know I don't know where you'd stick Rich Hill. Maybe third.
Yeah,
We'll see what they do. Either way, we know Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo,
yeah, I see that.
are,
And then
are going to go.
and then Sunday is just like I don't even maybe Graham Ashcraft.
Yeah,
Probably.
maybe. I got to figure the Pirates can get to 2 of those guys. And offensively, I don't really fear the Reds at all. That doesn't
No.
mean that the Reds couldn't lay 18 on the Pirates. I'm
They've
just
done it
saying
before.
they've done it before, and anything's possible in that ballpark. But I think they'll win 2 or 3 here.
I would. So how do we do this if we agree?
Then we agree. It's a running total all year, man.
Oh
We don't
yeah,
have-
so that
yeah.
so that I guess we just both get a point there or 0 points depending on how it goes. So I guess it's time now for everybody to know this. I'll let you know it now. You're saying 2 of 3. Well, let's just hope that loss isn't on opening day. You guys are going to see a crossover later this week with Locked On Reds where this will also be talked about. That myself and Stephen Offenbaker are having a opening day bet. If the Pirates win, he has to do an entire episode in Pirates gear. You already hear where this is going. If the Reds win, your favorite host of the Locked On Pirates podcast will have to do a show the following week in Red stuff. I could see my subscriber count going away so fast. I could see it as soon as people tune into this show and get on YouTube. If you want to, honestly, I'll let you guys know what episode it is, and you can just listen to the audio. That'll be my lowest viewed YouTube video of all time. I can just listen to the audio on Spotify, Odyssey, Google Play, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Great lead in there too. But I think 2 of 3 is reasonable. It's the start of the season. If this series was like once we have another series against Cincinnati, like way down the line, and things are hopefully going peachy, I would predict a sweep. But since it's the opening series of the year, you never know what's really going to happen on opening day. You never really know what's going to happen in this first series. I mean, for all I know, the Athletics could beat the Angels in their first series. I mean it happens all the time.
The key to beating the Reds is getting past their starter. If you can get
Yes.
past their starter and you're still in the game, you're gonna win because they don't have a bullpen.
No.
So I mean that to me is the key, and they don't have the offense to catch up. So if you do get to the starter early, then chances are you're probably going to pull it out. The Reds' path to victory is a hell of a lot more narrow than even the Pirates at this point. Yeah, and how this first series goes does not dictate where they're going to land in the standings all year. I should remind people, because should they end up losing 2 of 3 to the Reds, it's not going to mean that they're in the basement all season.
No. And I mean, you look at it, obviously next week when we have you on, we'll talk about the series at length because it'll be over. We'll talk about the week ahead. We'll talk about all that stuff. But I also, guys, I don't know what orders things are coming out this week because we have the NL Central preview coming out that was recorded last week. I just am waiting for the file. It'll come out when it comes out. The Locked On Reds show will come out probably Wednesday. And then the one given here is Craig will be on Thursday. That's the one given. And then Friday we'll recap opening day, take a look at the weekend, all that stuff. It's going to be a fun week. It's going to be a fun time here at Locked On Pirates. I get to do this with you guys all the way up through November. So Gary will be here every Monday, but Gary, what do you have going on for opening day this week other than the obvious 5 thoughts at 5?
Yeah, 5 thoughts of 5 on Monday. Wednesday, Craig and I will do our combination season preview that comes
Nice.
out on Inside the Bucks Basement. We do this one together every year. It's a tradition. This is the 4th year in a row we've done it. Kind of just give you a lay of the land, who made the team, who didn't make the team, what we expect from people, what we expect from the team itself, guesses and predictions, things like that. First call ups, all kinds of things that we cover in that. That'll come out on Wednesday. Everything else that week is normal.
Yep.
So
And I will be writing the game recap over at Bucks Basement on Thursday after that game is done. It'll come out immediately after the game is over. So we're going to enjoy that. And I'm going to also have a Locked On Now after that. YouTube Shorts are going to be a part of this as well. And one last thing before I shut it off today. On March 31st, which I believe is Friday, the podcast will culminate with a moment of silence for my blue check mark. Because I'm not paying $8 for Twitter Blue to keep a blue check mark. All right. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in today to the Locked On Pirates podcast. That's Gary Morgan. I'm Ethan Smith. We will see you guys on the flip side.